So imagine this. You're on a flight, and as the plane is filling up, there's an empty seat next to you. And you're kind of hoping that it's going to remain empty and you're going to have a double seat on your flight, which is always nice, especially because today airlines seem to give us just about this much space for our legs. So if you have a little extra seat next to you, it's quite nice. And as the plane fills up and your seat still remains empty, everything's looking great. And then suddenly, there's just one seat left in the plane. And it's next to you. And walking down the aisle is this big gentleman wearing a t-shirt that says, Jesus saves. He's got a long ponytail, a tattoo of a cross on one forearm, and he's holding a well-worn copy of the Holy Bible in his other hand. Okay? And you're thinking, oh no. And sure enough, he sits down next to you. And of course, maybe you're wearing a chai or a Hebrew star, or maybe you've got a yarmulke on your head, or whatever it is. And about 30 seconds after he sits down, he says, so, I noticed you're Jewish, is that right? And you really want to say, no, I'm actually a practicing Hindu, but it might get you out of some of these conversations, but you're like, yeah, I'm Jewish. And he says, can we talk for a moment about religion? And of course, your real response is, absolutely not. We cannot talk for a moment about religion. I'd rather sit here and read the Sharper Image catalog that somehow is still in my seat from when Sharper Image was a thing. But you say, sure. And he says to you the following. He says, listen. He says, there's so many Christians in the world. We're the largest religion. And I know that, the Jewish numbers are very small. 12 million, 13 million, right? Why in the world do you think you're right?
He said that to you?
No, I'm giving an imaginary scenario. I've had this before many times. I've had many, many times where people sitting next to me on a flight will try to proselytize or testify or whatever you want to call it. Because what makes you think that you're right? How do you know you're right? Chances are you're wrong. 1.6 billion people are probably not wrong, and 15 million people are right. Meaning, what makes you believe that you're right? Now, one possible answer you could say to him, is simply, well, there's many truths in this world, right? Which personally, I'm not a big fan of that answer, right? Because I'll give you an example. There's not many true answers to 2 plus 2, right? There's not many true answers to 2 plus 2. It's 4. That's the answer. Again, I'll tell you a secret right now. 2 plus 2 equals 4. There's not many truths to that answer. And on top of that, right, for example, the world was either created by God or not, right? We don't have room for multiple truths always, as much as we like to believe. Now, of course, when it comes to human relationships, things are much more complex, right? And obviously, sometimes, for example, with one couple, while you might say that this couple needs to be spending a lot more time together, the other couple, you might be saying you guys need to be spending a little more time apart because you're together all the time and you're getting on each other's nerves. You need a little bit more time for each one of you to develop their own personal sense of identity. You've got a little bit of codependency going on. So while, of course, there are different truths to each specific relationship, but there's not going to be 2 truths or 5 truths or 10 truths or 100 truths to the idea of religion, right? Meaning, as much as there's this beautiful idea, well, they're all true. They're not all true because they all contradict each other. Like, Judaism's beliefs are very much not agreeable to Christianity. We believe that Jesus Christ was not a Messiah, was not a Son of God, was not the Savior of the world, was not even a prophet. They believe all that to be true. It's either true or it's not true. And it's not going to work well with Islam either. Again, Islam is a monotheistic religion, and we relate to that part of Islam. We too believe in the existence of one God. We don't believe that there was a prophet named Muhammad who was getting the word directly from God, and what he wrote down in those Quranic books and the sutras are what we should be following. We don't believe that. It's not. The truths are not compatible. There's not many truths. Polytheism or monotheism. There's either one God who created everything, or there's multiple gods in charge of multiple stuff. They're not compatible. So while we love to say, well, why can't there just be many truths? Because there's not many truths. This is not green, right? This is a simple truth. There's not many truths. And again, when it comes to relationships and feelings, and again, like I said, this relationship might need a little more time together, and this relationship might need a little more time apart. That's because each one of those is a very specific relationship. But there's not 1,000 million truths out there when it comes to religion. So he's asking you a question. He's saying to you, how do you know that you are right? Why are you Jewish? So we have, again, the first answer could simply be, because all religions are true. Why can't we all just be true? Because we can't all just be true. That's fine.
Oh, thank you, dear.
Step number 2. Maybe we say, well, because I grew up that way. You know what? I don't know that Judaism is right, but that's the way I grew up, so I kind of stick with it. That's a pretty default position. And by the way, I think that's the default position that a lot of people have had, which is possibly why we see such rampant numbers of assimilation today. Because if the only reason why you're holding on to Judaism is that's what we grew up with, then when you meet a beautiful young girl who does not hold that religion and does not want to practice or raise her kids Jewishly or anything like that, you're like, well, all right, I did grow up with X, Y, and Z, but this is more compelling. I don't really believe in Judaism. I'm just comfortable with it because I grew up with my bubby's latkes and my other bubby's, chicken matzo ball soup. If that's what you got, if that's all that you've got going for you for why you believe in your Judaism, that's a very frail default position, easily dislodged by something else. Let me just pause for a quick blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh bidbaro. So, I personally, again, I don't believe in the idea that all religions are true. I believe that most religions are an attempt to find the truth, right? I believe that many people in many, many religions are sincerely looking for a godly way to live their lives on this earth. Don't get me wrong on that one. I want to be very clear about that. There are millions of very, very devout Christians in this world who are looking honestly and earnestly to try to live their lives by a divine and moral code. I'm not doubting that for a second. But what I'm saying is, I don't believe that the core tenets of Christianity with JC are true. And I don't believe that you could have all religions being true. And I also don't believe that we should be Jewish because that's the way we grew up. Because that says nothing about the veracity of our Judaism. If we then grew up in a Christian household, we should have been Christian, but I don't believe that. I believe that I need to be passionately believing in what I believe in, especially if I want to be able to pass it on to the next generation. But more importantly, for myself, if I want to be able to be practicing it properly, I got to believe in it. So how do I know that I'm right? The guy sat down next to me on the plane and asked me that question, right? How do I know? What's the answer to that question? How do I know that I am right? Or that not I, but like the Jewish world is right. Faith is not enough for me. I need a little more than that. I'm sorry. Because they also have faith. The Christian next to you, if you say that, well, I just have faith. He says, I've got faith too. And I've got 1 billion people on my side with faith in my thing. So why does your 12 million people trump my 1.6 billion people?
Because it's blind faith.
Well, blind faith, now, blind faith is he's got blind faith too. If that's all that you've got, well, I just have faith. And by the way, I one time had a debate with a Christian couple. I had no interest in doing it. Generally, by the way, my rule of thumb for all of you is if you sit down next to on a plane with somebody or anywhere, they meet you at the park, and you hear the word, exactly, if you hear the word Yeshua, not Yehoshua, which is Joshua the prophet, but you hear the word Yeshua, which is the Christian Hebrew name for Jesus, just run away. Say thanks, but no thanks. Right? I think that guy right over there jogging, I think he needs a good conversation about Yeshua. I'm not up for that right now. Do not engage. As you said, retnished. Don't talk to them about it. It just doesn't go anywhere. Yeah?
Torah
What about Torah?
is the way that we can say we know about
So what about the Torah? What about the Torah makes you say that you know that you're right?
that God revealed himself on Mount Sinai to over 2 million people.
No.
That's an excellent answer. By the way, we may cover that in one of these classes here. That's an amazing answer, talked about by some of the greatest Jewish philosophers. So that's a good answer. But that's not the answer we're going to cover today. But that is a solid answer, by the way. And we can, hopefully, we may have another series here where we'll flesh out that answer. There's a couple different answers you can give the guy with the Bible and the Bible thumper who's sitting next to you on the plane. What Jerry's bringing up right now is one of those, the idea of a mass revelation. But we're going to try to go with a different one right now. And that's the point of this two-part series that we have this week and next week. By the way, next week will not be in this room. It'll be in the last third of Handelman Hall. So, just for the service announcement. Okay, so now, if it's possible, can you just turn around and look back? Oh, yes. Thank you so much. Okay, now, so what is our answer to the Bible thumper? So here we go. What we're going to do is we're going to follow what we call the 7 wonders of Jewish history. And this will hopefully, through text, be able to give you the very strong confidence that our religion is the correct religion. Not just because I have blind faith. Oh, I wanted to say, so I recommend, don't get into these conversations with these people. It's not worth it. However, this couple cornered me and I ended up getting, I knew that I had some strong things that would shut them down. So I employed my arguments with them, and I got them in a quarter, and the wife sort of realized, okay, like, we got to leave this guy alone, he's got us. But the husband, of course, he doubles down, and you know what he says to me? He says, those who have faith don't ask questions, and those who ask questions don't have faith, right? So he's got blind faith too. As a matter of fact, when I asked him questions, he got stuck, so he just said, well, those who have faith don't have questions, and those who ask questions don't have faith. Judaism is not like that, by the way. We're the religion that says, ask, Fred, all day long. Ask and ask. The night that we teach faith to our children, which is the Pesach Seder night, is built on questions. We're all about the questions. We believe that you learn your faith through asking questions, not by running away from questions and saying blind faith. So, we're not going to go with blind faith, hopefully, today. We're not going to go with all religions are true. But what that really means, by the way, when someone says, well, all religions are true, you know what that really means? No religions are true. Right? When you say everyone is true, what you really mean is I don't want to get into this thing and I just want to feel good about like just the world, Pangea, whatever, the whole world. So I just say everything is true. Really, it means that I've not studied many of them in great depth, and I could, if I did, I would know that they can't all be true. It just means that I really don't give credence to all of them, so I just want to show that I'm an accepting and tolerant person, so I say all religions are true, which really means, again, that no religions are true. Right? Because if everything is true, then nothing is true. If you don't have what you believe in, then you believe in everything, right? That's what happens when you don't have anything to believe in. You believe in everything. So we don't want to go with everything is true. We don't want to go with I grew up that way, and we don't want to go with blind faith. So what do we got? We got the 7 wonders of Jewish history. Now, if you read the holy works of most religions, as a matter of fact, of pretty much all religions, here is what they do. You can read the New Testament. You can read the Quran. You can read all the Bhagavatas, whatever they're called, Bhagavatas of the Hindu people. You could read the great Buddhist works. Here's what they do. They may tell you how to live. They definitely tell you how to live your life here in this world. But when it comes to the future, they don't talk about this world. They talk about the glorious kingdom come. If you believe in JC as your Lord and Savior, you will get eternal bliss. And if you don't believe in him, you will get eternal damnation. And if you are a Muslim and you follow the rules of jihad and you die in battle or whatever it is, you get 70 friends, shall we call them, in heaven. Right? 70 friends in heaven. And if you follow this and you get, in Buddhism, you're able to go up through the, mandala, reach nirvana, yada, yada, yada. What they don't say is what's going to happen in this world. It does not give very clear and very concise instructions about what's going to happen in this world. And the reason for that is very simple. If I was writing the text of a book that I wanted to go out and become a major world religion, the one thing I would not do is say what's going to happen. Because I have no idea what's going to happen. And I'm smart enough to know my own limitations. I don't know what's going to happen. So I don't make very, very bold and exact predictions of what's going to happen, because then if they don't come out to be true, I'm done. Let's say, for example, I were to say that, anybody who follows my religion will grow a 6th digit on every hand. You think one opposable thumb makes you have a benefit over the rest of the animals? Try 2 opposable thumbs. You know what kind of spiral you can get on a football with 2 opposable thumbs? Psh, you could throw that football 800 yards and it would go exactly straight. Psh, 2 opposable thumbs. You don't need to be part of the Golden State Warriors to hit 3 shots like they're raining out of the sky. Anybody who has 2 opposable thumbs will be able to do that. So I say whoever follows my religion will grow an extra opposable thumb, being a sign upon them that they have chosen the good Lord and the true Lord. And people are like, this is amazing. This religion, I've always wanted 2 opposable thumbs. It's just like, for me, it's key, especially if I can marry somebody who's got 2 opposable thumbs, we pass it on to our children. What a genetic advantage. What a genetic advantage. The world shall be inherited, not by the meek, but by the 2 opposable thumbed people. So I started following this religion, and I'm following everything to the T. And guess what happens? I don't grow a 2nd opposable thumb. But the religion said, if you follow my religion for 2 years, you will grow an opposable thumb. I tried for a year, for 2 years, maybe I counted wrong, maybe I'm not doing it right. 3 years, 4 years, I am out of here. Done. Right? Okay. That is why people don't write in their books, their holy books, what's going to happen in this world. They don't want to take that chance because they write it in. They have no idea what's going to happen. And then if it doesn't come true, then they're done. So what do they write about? What's going to happen in Kingdom Come? Because guess what? Nobody ever comes back with a report card. Right? Nobody ever comes back from the dead and says, you know what, by the way? I went up there. I had eternal bliss. Me and JC hanging out on the golf course. He's got a wicked swing. He's doing birdies every time. Nobody ever came back from the dead to tell us that. It's very safe to promise all sorts of things will happen in a world that nobody will ever see. So go through a religious text after religious text after religious text after religious text, and you will see heaps and mounds of promises of what will happen in a world that they will never ever be able to see and never be able to verify. It makes sense if you were writing a religion to do it that way. And it makes so much sense that pretty much every religion out there does that. Except for ours. Ours does it very, very differently. Our book instead says, you open up a Chumash, the 5 books of Moses, you will not see a single word about the world to come. No promises of streets paved with gold, right? Nothing. Open up the 5 books. Open up the entire books of the Scripture, all the books of the Tanakh. You will not find a single word about what will happen in the world to come. You can find it in the Talmudic text. You can find it later. But if you open up the Scripture, the Jewish Scripture, not a word about what will happen in Kingdom Come. And instead, there are incredibly precise and clearly spelled out descriptions of what will happen in history. Now, normally the rule of thumb is the word history is
His story.
his story, right? I'm sure you've heard that before. The word history is his story. So while we look back, it's almost July 4th soon, and we talk about how we overthrew the oppressive British, right? Horrible, the colonists rose up against the oppressive British. In England, what do they say? We didn't care about that, so we left. I don't think that's what they're teaching exactly, but a trifling matter. Some colonists were getting unruly. We deemed it best to try to leave after a few years of war. To us, it's our founding story. Thanksgiving. Americans, we sit around the table, and we have the turkey, and the corn, and the pumpkin pie, and the dressings, and the relish, and the stuffing, and all that, and we sit down and we talk about how the colonists came to America, and they had this amazing peaceful coexistence with the Native Americans, right? And how we all sat down to celebrate our harvest together. And you have all these little kids putting on skits at all these public schools all over the country with the Native Americans and the colonists and the Puritans with the hats and the colonists and the Native Americans. And it's like this whole big kumbaya celebration of colonists and Native Americans. Whereas on some reservation out in North Dakota, where the people are living in abject poverty, they sit down on the floor like Tisha B'Av and cry on Thanksgiving. And their story is, the white man came, gave my people smallpox, stole my land, drove me out of it in a trail of tears, and sent me to this God-forsaken place in North Dakota, where, believe it or not, even under a reservation, there's no oil. There's oil everywhere in North Dakota except for here. Right, so there's Thanksgiving stories, not exactly the same story as our Thanksgiving. That's because history is his story. We all write it the way we want to write it. When I was a kid, we learned in school that we won the Vietnam War. Which, frankly, we didn't win the Vietnam War, right? Not at all. So, but that's the way we were taught it at that age. Back then, it was still close enough to the war, and that's the way they were teaching it in school. That we won the Vietnam War. It's his story. When you write history books for things after they happened, you write them the way you want them to be. But there's a different historian. A historian with a capital H. God. Because the Torah and the books of the Scripture are not just a history of what happened backwards, but they actually tell you the history of what will happen to the Jewish people for thousands of years. Again, like no other religion. The Christian Bible does not give very clear and concise descriptions of what will happen to the Christians over the course of their thousands of years. But our Torah does. And amazingly, it's gotten it right again and again and again and again. Despite the fact that the claims that it makes are often contradictory, not supportive of each other at all, and so wild, the predictions that it makes about the Jewish people, that it doesn't happen to anybody else in the world. We're going to see that in a moment. Literally, not happening to anyone else in the world. Some of these predictions. Some do, some don't. Okay. The goal of this two-part series is to show two things. Number one, that the God of the Torah, whoever that God was who wrote the Torah, number one, not only had knowledge of what would happen throughout history, but somewhat control over what would happen in history. And number two, that we, the Jewish people, are God's chosen people. And that's our response to Mr. Bible Thumper on our flight to LA. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, because of that, Judaism commands us to study history. The Torah never tells us to study music. I love music. I find my Shabbos to be so enhanced by the singing that I do in shul and at my Shabbos table. I love it. Right? I sing it. My Shabbos is filled with song. I go to services Friday night. We sing the whole Echad Odi, and we sing throughout the whole Kabbalat Shabbat. We may sing a song during the evening services. I come home. I sing the Shalom before we stand around our table. My kids sing with me. It's beautiful. We sing Shalom Aleichem. We sing Eishes Chayil. We sing in my house a special small song thanking God for all the kindness and goodness He has done for us in the previous week and that we're confident He will do for us in the coming week. We're singing a bunch. We're singing maybe one or two songs during the meal. What's called Shabbos Zemiros. Songs. Then I go to bed. I wake up in the morning, depending on what time it is. Maybe I'll get a coffee and sit and study a little bit of Torah in the morning, walk to shul with my kids, and in shul we're singing again. Singing, singing, singing. And then I come home, I have the meal, we're singing during the meal again. Then I take my nap, I wake up, learn a little, play with my kids, spend time with my wife, go back to shul, have the afternoon services, not much singing in afternoon services. But then we go downstairs, the synagogue, we go downstairs and we have Shalom Shudas together, or I go back home and have the third meal with my wife. And what are we doing? Singing. Singing, singing, singing. I love it. But the Torah never says anywhere, learn music. You're not going to open up the scripture and see where the Torah says, go learn music. It doesn't exist. The Torah does not tell us to learn chemistry. Chemistry is really important. I love chemistry. As a matter of fact, last night, I didn't end up buying it yet, but I think I was going to buy this t-shirt. It shows a picture of the periodic table of elements, and it says, I wear this shirt periodically. That's me. I'm a little bit of a chemistry dweeb. More biology than chemistry. I love biology. I find biology to be fascinating, amazing. The more you learn biology, the more you see the greatness of God's creation. Unreal. Unreal, the complexity out there. Tremendous, fascinating. I love it. The Torah does not say study chemistry. The Torah does not say study biology. The Torah does not say study mathematics. The Torah does not say study engineering. The Torah does not say study political science. But the Torah does say study history. Because the Torah knows that when we become students of history, then we will know that Judaism is a true religion. Let me just get a source sheet from here. Short one source sheet. Let's see the source inside. Source number 1. Remember the days of old, tells us the Torah. Understand the meaning of each generation. Ask your father, and he shall instruct you. Your elders, and they shall tell you. In the book of Deuteronomy, the Torah is telling to you, remember the days of old. Go out and study history. Understand the meaning of each generation. Look at our world and understand what happened throughout the generations and throughout the ages. Again, the Torah does not say study the periodic table of elements. The Torah does not say study, understand the scales of music. Learn do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, do. No, that doesn't say that. It says understand the meaning of each generation. Ask your father and they will tell you. Remember the days of old. Because again, the Torah knows that when you study history, you understand that there's something very, very special about our relationship with God and very, very powerful and true about the Torah that He gave us. Now, we are not the only people to recognize this. When Louis XIV, he was somewhat of an impatient and petulant young man, and he wanted to know, he once called in his court philosopher, and he said to him, Pascal, it's almost lunchtime, and I've got a 30-day feast coming up. And once I get started, there's no stopping me. It's 30 days of hedonism. Louis XIV used to make 180-day parties while the people were starving in the streets. Just if you talk about the whole French Revolution. Right? Louis XIV, the sun god, right? As he used to call himself. Or the sun king. Anyway, so Louis XIV, he's about to jump into 180 days of despicable hedonism. But he's troubled by this one question, is there a God or not? So he says to Louis, he says to Pascal, the famous French philosopher and court philosopher, he says, Pascal, I want you to prove to me the existence of God, but in one sentence. What does Pascal say? The Jews, Your Majesty. The Jews. The existence of the Jews. The story of the Jews. The history of the Jews. Even Pascal, a Christian philosopher, when trying to prove that there's a God, says, the Jews, Your Majesty. The Jews. And he's not the only non-Jew to recognize something very unique about Jewish history. One of my favorite authors in the world, Mark Twain. Let's see what he has to write about it in the magazine Harper's Bazaar in 1899. Here we go. Source number 2. If the statistics are right, the Jews constitute but 1% of the human race. Today it's much smaller. Today it's not even 20% of 1%. It suggests a nebulous, dim puff of stardust lost in the blaze of the Milky Way. We're tiny, we're nothing. Properly, the Jew ought hardly to be heard of. But he is heard of, has always been heard of. He is as prominent on the planet as any other people, and his commercial importance is extravagantly out of proportion to the smallness of his bulk. His contributions to the world's list of great names in literature, science, art, Music, finance, medicine, and abstruse learning are also way out of proportion to the weakness of his numbers. He has made a marvelous fight in this world in all the ages, and has done it with his hands tied behind him. He could be vain of himself and be excused for it. The Egyptian, the Babylonian, and the Persian rose, filled the planet with sound and splendor, then faded to dream stuff and passed away. The Greek and the Roman followed and made a vast noise, and they are gone. Other peoples have sprung up and held the torch high for a time, but it burned out, and they sit in twilight now, or have vanished. The Jew saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was, exhibiting no decadence, no infirmities of age, no weakening of his parts, no slowing of his energies, no dulling of his alert and aggressive mind. All things are mortal but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality? Mark Twain is not a Jew. But Mark Twain sees there is something going on about this people. There is something unique. There is something incredible about these people. What is the secret of the Jew, asks Mark Twain. To which I would answer, it is our relationship with God and the Torah that he has given us. And in that Torah, he laid out what the secret of the Jew would look like for all the generations to come. And that is the 7 wonders of Jewish history, which hopefully by the time we are finished our next class, we will have a firm grasp of, and we will have what to answer the Bible thumper very comfortably. Okay, what is the first wonder of Jewish history? The first wonder of Jewish history is the idea of an eternal nation. How long have the Jews been around? If you count back to Abraham, 3,700 years. If you count back to Mount Sinai, 3,300 years. How many nations can you name me, right here, can you name me that have been around for 3,500 years? Anybody?
What about some of the ancient Eastern, like Zoroastrianism,
Okay.
Buddhism?
Buddhism is for sure way later. Buddhism came much, much more recently, right? But Zoroastrianism is a good one. It's not a huge, we don't see much of it in the world, but it exists. There are still today people who follow Zoroastrianism, whatever. But yeah, that's one. Okay, we'll give you one. Anybody else? Who else has been around that long? Who?
I don't think I know.
So some might say that some of the Hindus, Hinduism itself was sort of a coming together of the Aryans and the Dravidians from the lower part of India and the higher part of India, and they sort of melded together. But it's definitely questionable if it happened 3,500 years ago. But we'll count them in. I'll tell you another person who thinks. I was at the Grand Canyon. There's different places. There's different approaches to the Grand Canyon. There's Grand Canyon National Park, which is a national park, and costs you an entrance fee. Like the way national parks generally work is you pay an entrance fee as you drive into the national park, and that's pretty much it. And everything's free once you get inside. There's another part. It's on Native American land, and let me tell you something. We have definitely done wrong to the Native Americans for decades and for years and for centuries. However, this is a little mini revenge scheme. They charge you $35 to get onto the land. Then they charge you $35 to park. Then they charge you like another $35 to take the bus from the parking lot to the rim, which you could walk, but you're not allowed to walk. You have to take the bus. And then if you want to go on this glass little thing that overlooks, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That's like another $38. Now, it's also incredibly misleading. What?
A person or a family?
Per person.
Oh my.
Yeah, if you want to go out on that glass thing, on that walkway, it's $38, something like that, per person. But not only that, it's a total scam. Because they say that the glass thing that you're walking out on is like, 6,000 feet above the canyon floor. It is 100% misleading. I'll explain to you why. here's the Grand Canyon, right? Here it is. And it goes down like this, until finally right over here you've got the water at the bottom, right? The Colorado River. Now, the distance from the bottom by the water to the top might be 6,000 feet, or whatever it is, 3,000, 6,000, whatever the number is. It's a huge number, right? Let's call it 4,000. However, when you walk out on that little rim thing, remember, here's how the canyon goes. So you're only standing out above like maybe 600 feet, right? You understand what I'm saying? Because the canyon goes down like this. So when you walk, now if you were to walk out all the way to the middle of the canyon on a glass thing, you would be looking down 6,000 feet or whatever the number is. But when you walk out on this little glass arch, you're standing on top of maybe 600 feet, right? Maybe. I mean, if you're standing on top of the CN Tower, if you've ever been to the CN Tower in Toronto and you stand on this glass thing on the top, you're definitely looking down much further than you're looking down at the Grand Canyon. So it's very misleading.
Plus they charge for pictures.
They charge for pictures too?
Yeah, you're not allowed to carry anything out on that.
Oh, I didn't even remember that part. So if you want to take a picture, there you
They have
go.
the photographer there that could.
So anyway, so listen, it's a little bit of a racket, but you know, call it kavod. They're getting us back. They deserve it. We gave them smallpox blankets. No, we didn't. Actually, it's not true, but the smallpox blanket thing is a little bit of a myth. But we definitely mistreated them. All right, they mistreated us a little bit. Fair. I can appreciate that. So I'm walking in the parking lot there, and I see one of the Native American security guards, and I say to him, "How long have your people been here at the Grand Canyon?" And he says to me, 35,000 years. It's a pretty impressive number. I said, "You guys have like any archaeological evidence of that?" "No, but we've been here 35,000 years." "Okay, all right, maybe. I don't think so. I don't think that. I mean, remember, like in terms of people coming over, populating the landmass from the Bering Strait when it was frozen over. You know, history doesn't seem to agree with that number, but especially because also the Native American tribes constantly shifting names, alliances, tribal size, tribal name. So the reality of that nation being there for 35,000 years, exceedingly doubtful. But let's call him he's been there for 3,500 years. So we've got the Hindus, we've got the Zoroastrians, we've got the Native Americans perhaps, or at least the ones who live by the Grand Canyon. Who else do we have? Right? Some could say the Han Chinese. Of course, the Chinese were totally taken over by the Mongols and the Manchus at two separate times. A lot of cultural assimilation and change happened to the Chinese, but maybe you say the Chinese, there's still some sort of pure Han Chinese. Of course, the Han Dynasty was only 2,000 years ago, but the people who came before them, maybe we'll get 5 nations in the world, 5 that have been here for 3,500 years, out of 5,000 nations that have been here in the history of the world. What percentage is that? What percentage is 5 out of 5,000? 0.1%, okay? 0.1%, which means that 99.9% of nations are not eternal. I'll tell you who's not eternal. The Roman Empire is not eternal. The Roman Empire. Think about what it controlled. Pax Romana, 250 years, where they controlled massive swaths, almost the entire Europe, parts of North Africa, parts of Asia. The Greeks under Alexander the Great, think of what a massive empire they had. The Persians, the Mongols, right? They had massive, massive empires. They're all gone. The Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians. And there are people who live in Egypt today, but they're not Egyptians. They're not, I'm saying, if you ask them, where are you from? Oh, I'm Egyptian, but they're not the Egyptians from ancient Egypt. They don't speak the same language. They don't have the same religion. There's no connection between the people who live in Egypt today, who are overwhelmingly Muslims, and small amounts of Coptic Christians, who are unfortunately being slaughtered and pushed out, which is horrific. And the ancient Egyptians who were there when the pyramids were being built. There's no connection. So 99.9% of nations in the history of the world have not been around eternally. 0.1%, let's call it, have been. So if you are going to write a book, and you want to write about a specific family, the family who are the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Yisrael, Would you write that this people is going to be around forever? That'd be a very bad bet. It'd be a very bad bet. Because again, 99.9% of people are not around eternally. The land is here eternally, and different people live on the land. But to say that one particular group is going to be here forever, one particular family as a cohesive unit is going to be here forever, very bad bet. It doesn't work for 99.9% of the people. Yet the Torah says, in multiple locations, that we are going to be here eternally. And somehow we have been. So that's the first wonder of the world. Let's see some of the sources. Number one, source number 3, I mean. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you throughout the generations, an eternal covenant to be your God and the God of your descendants. So God says, I'm making an eternal relationship between me and you, Abraham, and your descendants. That's 3,700 years. And we're still here. Next, Leviticus. Yet even so, while they are in their enemy's land, I will not reject or spurn them. Why not? Lest by wiping them out, I make void my covenant with them, for I am their God. I will remember them because of the covenant I made with their forefathers, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt under the very eyes of the Gentiles, that I might be their God. God says, I can't wipe them out because they're my people, and I made a covenant that we will be together forever. More, Malachi, which is one of the books of the prophets. For I am God, I do not change. You are the children of Jacob, you will not cease to be. You, the Jewish people, the grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren of Jacob, will not cease to be. You will be here forever. For 35,000 years. Furthermore, now this one's even more interesting because it not only says that we're going to be here, but it talks about some of the things that we're going to be doing forever. This is a crazy statement, this next one coming up. Again, because not only does it say that we are going to be here forever, but it says what we're going to be doing forever. As for me, this is my covenant with them, says God. My spirit which rests upon you, and my words which I have put in your mouth, shall not depart from your mouth, nor from the mouths of your children, nor from the mouths of our children's children, says God, from now on to all eternity. So God not only says that we're going to be here for eternity, but he says we're going to be talking these words of his covenant. Which, by the way, parenthetically, we are doing right now. What are we doing right now? We are reading over the words of that covenant. 3,000 years later, we're still doing it. And again, this last one is, I think, to me, the most amazing one. Because not only does God say that we're going to be here, which is a tough bet to take, 99.9% of nations don't make it, but it says we're going to be here, and it tells you what we're going to be doing, and we're doing it right now. There has never, ever been a time in history where Jews did not study the words of the covenant of God. As a matter of fact, here's something fascinating. Let me ask you guys, can you, anybody, collectively, everybody here in this group, can you name me 5 Jews who lived between the years 500 of the Common Era and the year 1000? 5 Jews. Can you name me one? Can you name me one Jew who lived between the years 500 and 1000 of the Common Era? Okay, I can. Rav Hai Gaon, Rav Sadia Gaon, right? These are rabbis who wrote, and that's how we know their names, because they wrote these incredible works that we still have. How about this? Can you name me 5 Jews who lived from the year 1000 to the year 1500? Maimonides, excellent. You got one? Nachmanides, there you go. Maimonides, Nachmanides, that's 2. Who else? Rambam is Maimonides. Very good.
Akiva.
Rabbi Akiva lived way before that.
Way before.
Way before. Rabbi Akiva lived before the year, he lived right around the time of the beginning, of 0 of the Common Era.
Joseph Caro, when was he?
Joseph Caro was a little bit past 1500, but you're on target. Now I can name you a ton of people who lived between the year 1000 and 1500. Not show off, but I want to point out Rashi, who was Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. There was Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi, Rabbi Avram, the one who wrote the Rush, Rabbi Avram ben Usher, right? There's Rabbi Usher, who was his father. There is Rabbi, let's see it, the Rivan, the Rajba, the Ritva, right? How do I know these names? Because I've studied their works. Throughout history, the way we know that not only the only Jews that we really know of are the ones who wrote. And what were they writing? The words of the covenant. I can create a timeline from you of Jews going from me all the way back to Moses. Literally. I can give you a timeline of people from me and from you back to Moses. And the only way I can do that is by studying who studied under who was whose rabbi. And you can literally go through the ages, going all the way back up to Moses. So not only did God say that we're going to be here forever, he said forever and ever we're going to be studying his words, talking about the covenant. And here we are, 3,500 years later, studying his words, talking about the covenant. What's the probability? If you picked a random nation out of all the 5,000 nations that have been here in the history of the world, what's the probability that anyone would even be alive, let alone studying the same things they were studying 3,000 years earlier? 1/10 of 1%. So if you were writing a book, would you want to write in that book that this particular family, this group of people is going to be here forever and ever? Absolutely not. That's suicide for your entire religion. But yet somehow in our book, it didn't get written once. It got written again and again and again and again. So how are you going to claim that any particular nation is going to be here forever? It's crazy talk. Maybe, if they have a very strong homeland. Look at some of the other nations that we mentioned, like the Hindus and the Chinese. They've been sitting in one area for a long time. And for a long time, they were actually closed off. They tried to close themselves off and isolate themselves, right? Maybe that's how the Jews are going to be able to last forever and ever, because we're going to have this very strong homeland. Maybe we'll all be on the islands of Fiji. And we're just so far, we're so remote, we're left alone. Maybe that's how it would work. Because again, it's just to say that you're going to be here forever is very, very strange. So maybe if the way we could be around forever is we would live on a homeland, very secure, easily defensible borders. I just came back from Iceland, right? The Iceland, you know that Iceland's, of course, it's not covered in ice, it's covered in green. And Greenland is covered in ice. And the reason they say that Iceland was called Iceland is they didn't want anybody coming. Stay away. Oh, it's so icy over here. It's so cold. It kind of is cold. The middle of the summer there I was there just last week. The whole entire time we were there was 45 to 55 degrees. So it was kind of cold, but it's not covered in ice at all. It's verdant and green. It's not a lot of great agriculture, but it is green. You look at a satellite image of Iceland, it's green. Look at a satellite image of Greenland, and it's ice. So maybe if we all moved to Iceland, and we just got left alone over there, do our thing, we can grow, populate ourselves, and all would be good. But the same book that said that we're going to be eternal also said that we're going to be exiled. Now, exile in general in history is a very uncommon phenomenon because it does not meet the desired goals of the occupiers. When I take over a country, if I exile everybody out of it, then I've got no value in the country. I want to keep them there, and I want them to pay tribute to me. That's what happens throughout all of history. Exile is incredibly rare, but we're going to see that the Jews are not only exiled once, they're exiled twice. But we'll have to cover that next week. Thank you so much for coming. I look forward to continuing this conversation with you next week. Shalom, shalom.